Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Deep breath time. Almost everybody here. Thank you once again for bearing with us. The weather is quite nice today. On that basis, we decided to lock you inside here. Brief housekeeping once again. I got the fire escape wrong. It is that side. That side is now blocked by the chair. Also behind you, in case of emergency. We are filming, as you probably just saw, so this is on live. If anybody has any issues with that, very sorry, but do be aware. We do have press in and out today, so again, just be aware. We're delighted to receive them. I just wanted very briefly, as we start today, to recap on the aims of the Inter-Islands meeting, and also what we're trying to do here with Wilder Islands this year. The Inter-Island meeting is a collaborative joining together, normally of the Channel Islands, sometimes of other islands. This year we've been given an opportunity to welcome more people in, and we're delighted to do so. We're all islands with unique problems. We're also all islands with common problems. And as the discussions go through today, we'll all see the commonality. We all know the commonality. What we'd like to do during the course of the remaining 2 days of the conference is look towards the outcomes, those bits of information, connections that we can take away from the conference, the gains we can take away from the conference as well. This afternoon we have workshops, which most of you will be aware of. If you're not, at lunchtime we'll make sure we have a board up with the workshop titles. I think the conveners will also remind you during the course of the day to please either sign up. We're happy if you don't want to attend the workshops and you want to just go out for one day. But if you do, get yourself signed up, please. And on the board in the oratory, we'll also have options to put down some of the topics you want discussed in those workshops. We're leaving very much as an open working area to take thoughts and ideas away from the conference. Tomorrow's Wilder Island session is a discussionary and hopefully an illuminating series of debates. During the course of that, the states of Alderney and other governments attending the island are going to be discussing the Blue Island Charter. We're quite happy to update you with what the outline of that Blue Island Charter is, but also looking at other ways in which island governments can facilitate joint working together and ensuring that this charter manages to have some life going forwards. And that meetings like this are more common possibly in the future. That's all from me. I'm going to pass over to the first convener today. Very grateful to Charles Luther.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be introducing the next 5 presentations, which will focus on the importance of birds to our island ecosystems, the value of partnership for recovery, reintroduction and fundraising, and also, above all, how the public positively engage with bird life. Perhaps it's the visibility of birds, their song and their accessibility, but undoubtedly birds make up a significant part of our conservation efforts. Some may argue that this is to the detriment of other species, but yesterday we heard of amazing research and conservation work being undertaken in relation to bats and insects. I truly love the idea of a pesticide-free Channel Islands. And so perhaps a more balanced approach is being adopted. After all, the RSPB, its mantra is now to give nature a home. However, birds are incredibly charismatic in the public eye and have the potential to be used as flagship species and campaign tools. I know perhaps more than anyone the value of acute pattern. If we are able to use these species as valuable leverage tools for meaningful conservation work, then my conscience is clear. After all, it was Rachel Carson's bleak warning of a spring devoid of birdsong that helped give momentum to the modern environmental movement. So without further ado, our first speakers are Charlie Butt and Paul Buckley from the RSPB, who are going to talk about partnership based conservation in the UK Overseas Territories.
Well, thank you very much, and morning everybody. I'm Paul Buckley. I'm going to do the first half of the talk, then hand over to my colleague Charlie Butt. Those of you who've been to other conferences will know that I'm usually come here and talk about all sorts of different things, some of which I know more about than others. My credibility for talking about the overseas territories is based on the fact that the first 10 years of this century, which makes it sound an awful long time ago, I was very involved in the overseas territories, less so now, but I have, of course, remained extremely interested. Charlie knows much more about them, so he'll fill in any gaps. I hope that this is about the overseas territories, but I do hope that you'll, although of course they're different and they're all over the world in different places, I hope you'll see lots of parallels with the Crown dependencies and particularly the Channel Islands, so that you'll be able to sort of draw some conclusions from what we say. I hope you're awake because it's a bit of a gallop. There are 14 overseas territories around the world. You've probably seen this sort of map before. They're obviously very widespread. This is going to be a bit of a gallop through just some of the work that RSPB has and is doing with a wide range of really critical partners, most importantly, the local governments of the overseas territories and the, nearly always there's an important local NGO that we work through and with. The thing about the overseas territories is they are incredibly important. They have most of the globally threatened and endemic species for which the UK is responsible. And of the unique species found in the overseas territories, this just really is to show that we still know remarkably little about them. So only 143 of the endemic species have really been assessed in terms of their global threat categories. 1,349, probably most of them plants and invertebrates, we still know really too little amount to actually assess their status. Our work on the overseas territories is really focused on these four themes, and I'll touch on those briefly, and Charlie will do the same later when we talk about the Caribbean. I'm going to really focus first of all on the territories in the South Atlantic, what we broadly call the South Atlantic, and we'll touch on species, sites, policy and capacity, which are all really key elements of our work. I'm going to start on the island of St Helena, which is in the South Atlantic. You did see it in the map, I won't show it again. A lot of our early work on St Helena, working with the government and the St Helena National Trust, was focusing on this endemic bird, the wirebird or St Helena plover, which is obviously by its name only found on the island. Very, very low population levels, and it was obviously a little bit like our birds here. Was suffering from changes in agricultural practice. As a result of a lot of work with landowners and farmers, and there have been a lot of measures put in to start to restore conservation-focused agriculture, and not out of danger, but the bird is definitely doing better than it was. And then while working on St Helena, we realised that actually there is incredible endemicity. So very, very small areas of cloud forest left on the island, only about 40 hectares of this forest left, but absolutely critical for all sorts of reasons. Very critical in terms of the island's water supply and water resources. 40% of the island's water coming from these peaks where the cloud forest, the small areas of cloud forest remain. And around 250 species of endemic species found just in these small cloud forest areas, including this amazing creature, which is, I think, become a bit of a flagship, which is the spiky yellow woodlouse. But 200 of those, over 200 of those 250 species are invertebrates. And now a big plan is emerging with the government, the National Trust, and the Water Company of St Helena. There's a management plan being produced, and a plan is being put together for to restore, connect, and expand these tiny areas of cloud forest. Obviously, that's a lot of it's land purchase, it's land management, it's tree planting, it's control of invasive species, and it's going to be another really big project for the next few years. And I think that because St Helena is eligible for overseas development assistance, it's hoped that there is a source of funding, and it's obviously a critical project not only for biodiversity but for the islanders themselves. A little way north of St Helena and under the jurisdiction of St Helena is Ascension Island, and Ascension Island became famous back in the 1980s when it was the sort of launch pad for planes flying down to the Falklands. Another really important island, but an island that has suffered from introduced, like so many, from introduced predators, particularly cats. And when we first got involved in Ascension around 20 years ago, nearly all the seabirds were nesting on this tiny little island, Bosun Bird Island, off the coast of the main island, and including this bird. Sorry, it's not that bird. Including the Ascension Island frigate bird, which is the endemic bird, which Ascension is the only home. Just to cut a long story short, we did a eradication project. We removed the cats from the island, and fantastic results. For a lot of the boobies and the tropic birds, almost instantaneous. The frigate birds took about 5 or 6 years, but they're now back breeding on the main island. So then, of course, we realised that Ascension is, yes, it's a fantastic island. It's got seabirds, but it's surrounded by sea, and the sea is amazingly important. And it's one of what has become known as the Blue Belt, trying to get marine protected areas around the UK Oversea Territories. And Ascension, I think, is about the most recent one to be declared, which is a fantastic success. There's just on thing of partnerships, we're part of the Great Britain British Oceans Coalition, which is 6 NGOs, including Marine Conservation Society, ZSL, Greenpeace, and Pew Foundation and Blue Marine. And this is the group that we've worked closely with to work with the UK government and the Territories government to encourage the designations of these areas. And Ascension is incredibly important. One of the best experiences in my life was watching green turtles, both actually simultaneously on one night, females laying eggs and hatchlings emerging. Couldn't have timed it better. But the marine life around Ascension is truly astonishing. I couldn't believe that this picture, I queried whether this picture was from Ascension Island, but it is. So it's got amazing marine life. And there's a great story here because back in the sort of 2010-2011, there was a longline fishery launched around Ascension, very poorly regulated. It was causing a lot of damage. It stopped in 2014, and that provided the impetus to start talking about protecting the area. And this year, the Ascension Island government confirmed that 443,000 square kilometres of sea around Ascension is protected, and I don't always, those who know me will know that I don't always have great things to say about the UK government, but the UK government confirmed that they would support the long-term management and financing of that reserve. So, fantastic work. Moving swiftly south, this is Gough Island, well south of St Helena, right in the South Atlantic. One of the most remote islands on Earth. This is the Tristan da Cunha group. Tristan da Cunha is the island which is inhabited. Gough Island, even way south of that. And this is the site, I think, for probably one of the most ambitious projects that the RSPB has ever been involved in anywhere in the world. We've worked for quite a long time with the Tristan Island. It's been a fantastic relationship. We've had a number of programs with them. They're incredibly conservation conscious, and things on the main island are doing okay. But Gough is really special. Gough has almost the entire global population of this bird, the Tristan albatross, and it has the entire world population of this bird, Gough bunting. And there's only about 500 of these left. They've declined by about 50%. And there are lots of others, about 24 breeding species of bird on Gough Island, and nearly all of them are, internationally important numbers, or nearly the only place that the birds breed, and so on. So an incredibly important place. But there's a problem, and I've talked to some of you about this before. There are no rats on Gough Island, but there are mice, and the mice will effectively take on the role of rats. And they predate all the seabirds, they predate the Gough buntings, and they predate the young Tristan albatrosses, and up to about 9 mice at a time are attacking these birds. They don't have a response mechanism, and eventually they die. And I think there's now even records of them attacking the adults as well. So, massive problem, and on such a remote island, what on earth do you do about it? some of you were at Busy's discussion yesterday, and we, you know, this industry of island restoration has really taken off. And I was reading about a conference 40 years ago in New Zealand when everyone said it's virtually impossible to do this stuff, particularly on big islands. Since then, mice have been removed from the Macquarie's Islands in the South Atlantic, which is an island twice as big as Gough. And most incredibly, not to me at least, I've never been there, but you know, South Georgia has had rats removed from it. 100,000 hectares of habitat has been basically freed up of rats. And you know, amazing things. This is a slight diversion, South Georgia. I mean, you know, say no more. Penguins, amazing. So we can do this on Gough. And I moved away from the Overseas Territories work in 2009, but I mean, for several years before that, we were working on the idea of Gough. So there's been an awful lot of work done, an awful lot of feasibility studies, an awful lot of preparation. And now it's ready to go, and the plan is for it to happen next year. It involves 40 people on the island, 4 helicopters, ships. Things are already arriving there for this operation in 9 months' time. It's going to be an amazing thing, and if it can be successful, instantly you save 2 species from global extinction. And this is the consortium, the Tristan government, BirdLife South Africa, various grants from the UK government and foundations. It's been an amazing partnership effort. Okay, very quickly, finally, I'm going to just talk about policy, and the slides have gone really boring to reflect that. The Falkland Islands, another amazing place that the UK has responsibility for, well known, of course, one of the most productive marine environments in the world, 2/3 of the world's black-browed albatrosses, incredible for seabirds, incredible for cetaceans, a great place and a great community. We've had a lot of engagement there recently on the policy side because things are changing. There's new conservation challenges from things like offshore oil, salmon farming, and they don't really have the updated wildlife legislation and capacity that enables them to handle those things, and climate change impacts are, of course, bearing fruit as well. So working with the Falklands Conservation and the Falkland Islands Government, we've tried to do what we can to help them with policy, and particularly I just mentioned the offshore oil industry, which of course there's a debate there about whether we should be extracting oil from the Falklands, but it is happening, it is going ahead, and we've been trying to focus on making sure the policy and legislation is up to date. And I think there's a promising story here because the companies and the government have taken this on board. So there have been quite a lot of mitigation measures to avoid damage to the worst areas and avoid things like tanker movements in sensitive areas. And there's also a policy to try and ensure a net gain approach so that there is funding for restoration of wildlife habitats to compensate for any damage that the oil industry might cause. Okay, so that's the South Atlantic. I'm now going to hand over to Shine Butt to talk about the Caribbean.
Thank you very much, Paul. Well, good morning, everyone. So, hello everyone, my name is Charlie, and I manage the RSPB's conservation programme in the Caribbean Overseas Territories region. And so RSPB is the UK BirdLife partner. BirdLife International is a partnership of 120 partners around the world, and the ethos is around a shared strategy. And the BirdLife Secretariat supports its partners, and that's very much the ethos of the RSPB in the way that it works with its partners. So working with and through them, and I'm just going to talk through some aspects of the work that we do in the region to illustrate how that works in practice. So here is the Caribbean, Greater Antilles, Lesser Antilles, and in terms of the overseas territories, this is more or less where they are. So Anguilla, British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands over there, just south of Cuba, Montserrat, and the Turks and Caicos. And we working on all of those territories at the moment to a greater and lesser degree in each one. So while we're working at absolutely extraordinary biodiversity in the region, from the dwarf boas, from the Turks and Caicos, and the Cayman parrot, but unfortunately and of course, there's a very high degree of endemicity. So there's lots of species that you find there that you don't find anywhere else in the world, and that's illustrated very clearly with the amphibians, whereby all of them are endemic to the region, and a proportion of them are in fact threatened. And similarly with the reptiles, and my sense is that the few of the reptiles have been assessed, and I think a large proportion of those that have been assessed are threatened. And to steer the work that we do in the region, the RSPB led a piece of work which looked at all of the overseas territories and all of the species that have been assessed, and those species that were found to be the most threatened within that cohort, that sort of provides a steer really for our work in terms of species in the region. So we've identified about 15 or 16 amphibian and reptile species and species groups where we feel that there's a need for conservation effort, and where we feel that we can make a difference. And our biggest project I'm going to talk through in just a moment is on the Turks and Caicos rock iguana. We've done a little bit with our partner in Anguilla on the rock iguana through an EU-funded project, and we've got some other small-scale work in the pipeline. And I think where others have plans and projects in place, that's brilliant that they can take that forward. So FFI and Anguilla National Trust have got a major project which is about to kick off on some sombrero for the sombrero amoeba, and we're a sort of junior partner in that effort. So I'm just going to talk through a few slides that my colleague Sarah, who leads on our species recovery work, gave recently. This is a partnership with the National Trust in the region and San Diego Zoo, who have been operating out there for many years, and the government out there. So focusing on seeking to benefit two globally threatened species, so primarily Turks and Caicos rock iguana, critically endangered, only found in the Turks and Caicos. Main threats: invasive species and habitat loss. And it's also a major draw for tourism in the region. And one of the National Trust sites is actually one of the best sites to see the rock iguana. One of the other species that stands to benefit from the project is the Turks Island boa, an endemic subspecies and a major stronghold is on big ambergris. So this project mainly focuses on little water key and big ambergris key. And these are the components that the partnership is focusing on. So surveying, monitoring, biosecurity is integral to it. Surveys in the run-up and then using that to prioritise the work. There's a strong component of public awareness and capacity building within the partnership. And due to time, I'll just focus on a few elements of the project. So the surveying is actually, this is a long-term programme that's been going on long before the project began, but obviously the project's been supporting that. And as a result of that, we now have a good population estimate of the boas on big ambergris, so just under 5,000. And also more recently, the radio tracking of the boas to understand sort of their movements and dispersal on big ambergris. And I should also say that there's a major difference between big ambergris key and little water key. Big ambergris key being a private island that's actually being developed for very high-end tourism. And little water key is a National Trust site, which is safeguarded as a site and developed for light ecotourism. There's no major infrastructure there other than the facility that the Trust has out there. So in terms of biosecurity, biosecurity is, for those of you who went to the workshop the other day will know a lot more about it now, but it's essentially about keeping invasive species off islands that can do harm to the natives, the endemics. And obviously, invasives being a major threat to the endemic fauna. So, big ambergris tree was free of invasive mammals. It still largely is. There's been a couple of incursions of rats since the developments have picked up pace, but there's now a strong effort to get good biosecurity plans embedded in that development as it goes forward. And there's been a major project just recently to undertake a multi-island invasive species eradication in the Turks and Caicos, and hopefully we can talk a bit more about that in a year's time. All the monitoring has been done to look at the success of that, but obviously biosecurity is key to ensuring it's successful. And there's other aspects of the work around ensuring the legislation is there to sort of embed biosecurity in the islands where it's needed. And just a little bit about the capacity building aspect of the project and of the work that the RSPB does more broadly. It's not simply about, obviously the RSPB brings a lot of expertise to the region, but there's a huge amount in the region, and what this project is doing is sort of facilitating that within the partnership. So San Diego Zoo, immense herpetological skills shared within the partnership, the government departments bringing their expertise, and the trust as well bringing their unique skill set, and all of that is shared amongst the partnership through the project. So a little bit about our work on sites. So this is another Darwin Plus, and I should have said the other project is funded by Darwin Plus as well. So this is a partnership focused in Anguilla, Turks and Caicos and Montserrat. Broadly, it's about conserving and restoring wetlands in the region through sharing best practice, developing and applying technical measures, and promoting strength and safeguard. So we kicked the project off just a few months ago in Anguilla. Thank you, Farah. Thanks to the Anguilla National Trust for kindly hosting this workshop, which kind of got us going. Shortly afterwards, we went over to Montserrat. Montserrat's, so in the case of Turks and Caicos and Anguilla, there's existing wetland sites that we're looking to safeguard and restore in Montserrat. The wetlands they did have largely been lost. So the goal of the project in Montserrat is broadly to create a wetland again. And so we're doing that with our partners in the Department of Environment and the National Trust, but we know that we need to involve quite a wide set of stakeholders because the land that we're likely to focus on, there are a lot of interest in that, and so it's quite important that it's participatory, the way that we develop that action plan. We involve everyone that needs to be involved and that can contribute to it, and there's going to be a big push to get things moving in a couple of months' time with a major visit and action. And then the other sort of element relating to the wetlands creation in the Belém Valley, there is informal mining going on. There's no rehabilitation plans as such, but there's potential opportunities to recreate habitat through that. And we've got the RSPB has been working with the sector for many years, and so we're hoping to work with those who are doing that in the upper Belém Valley, and potentially with a view to safeguarding a possible wetland creation in the lower reaches as part of an integrated sort of catchment level plan, and that's going to involve quite a wide range of stakeholders to take that forward. So in terms of Turks and Caicos, we're focusing on one site in Providenciales, Whelan Pond. One of the main issues there is sort of illegal dumping. There's a suite of other issues that have just emerged in the last few weeks, which we're going to have to address. But we're working with the National Trust and the Government Department of Environment, and so developing surveys. And the whole project really is about getting action plans in place for the sites and then implementing them. The same for Anguilla, so Road Salt Pond, IVA and East End Pond. East End Ponds, one of the interesting things there is it have been partially infilled. There have been flooding issues, so we've working with the National Trust helped to facilitate some research around the feasibility of addressing those issues and safeguarding and enhancing those sites. So this is some exciting news which I'm glad to be able to share with you all today. This was many years in the making. I've only been in post a year and a half, and it's good to come in at the time when the exciting stuff happens and help to facilitate that. This is a partnership with the Rainforest Trust, with the Cayman Islands National Trust. We've basically just purchased a small block of land. We actually just purchased a small block of land in eastern Grand Cayman, which buffers an important bird area, Salina Reserve, which is one of the most important sites for blue iguana, which is endemic to Grand Cayman. It's an endangered species. And yes, this is an area which has been subject to bulldozing, is potentially open to development, and it's now being buffered by this site. And this is we know you obviously can't buy our way up to conservation prices, but I think where the land purchase comes into it is where the development control frameworks are weak, and it can play a role, but obviously it does require significant resource. Hence, we're grateful to the Rainforest Trust for co-funding the purchase. So in terms of policy, this is kind of an important context to some of the work that we're doing in the policy arena. Hurricanes Maria and Irma came through in 2017 with devastating impacts to people across the islands and wildlife. Some of our partners lost their homes, officers relocated, and of course with Dorian more recently, well over 1,000 lives lost in the Bahamas. And I think it does set the context for some of the policy needs, especially around how development takes place in the island. And we are having a real think about sort of what the RSPB as a conservation-focused organisation can do to kind of contribute to the increasing reality of hurricanes in the region. And one thing that we're doing already, and I think it's something that we might be exploring a bit more, is around how development is taking place to reduce, so that decisions are made that are basically more sensitive in the context of the climate change impacts in the region. And of course, we do that in partnership. This is the recent consultation in the Cayman Islands on the new development framework for the islands. And so we worked with our partners out there to kind of get some common messages shared, and we've gone through the sort of usual channels in contributing to that consultation. But we will be having a bit more of a think really about what we can do in that context. And then this is it really. So like I said, we're working with partners across the region. So that's in Anguilla National Trust. The Virgin Islands has two partners: it's the Parks Trust and the Jost and Dyke Preservation Society, Montserrat National Trust, Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos National Trust. And this is everyone in a recent convening in Miami, where we're looking at sort of joint work and collaboration. And that's it for me. So thank you.
Well, I hope everyone will agree that was a real fantastic demonstration of the value of partnership. Our second speaker is Jamie Marsh from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, who's going to give a talk about the very exciting project, which has attracted a lot of news recently, about the reintroduction of the white-tailed seagull to the Isle of Wight, and working with the community to successfully deliver the project.
So good morning, everyone. I'm going to try and condense as much as I can into this 15-minute slot. As you can imagine, this is a very exciting project, a lot's going on. So feel free to find me a pint of the pub tonight. It's interesting what's actually happening. So, this project has been driven by the Royal Dennis Wildlife Foundation and Wight England. In 2018, the Royal Dennis Foundation announced their intention, their aspiration to reintroduce white-tailed eagles to the Isle of Wight. This was quite timely. It coincided with the first draft of the Environment Bill, which highlighted rewilding, wilding, and reintroduction as a way forward to improve our local environment. It also cites white-tailed eagle as a keystone species for reintroduction. So, all very timely. So the announcement was made. The Isle of Wight community went into overdrive. Why the Isle of Wight? Why the eagle? What's it going to do to our endemic wildlife? And very valid questions. Why the eagle? There are probably other pressing, more important species that could be reintroduced. But the fact remains that this is a charismatic megafauna species. It grabs people's attention. There's funding for it. There's government will for this species to be reintroduced, and that's why the project was going. So why the Isle of Wight? Roy Dennis has introduced eagles to Scotland, east and west coast, to Ireland, and now the Isle of Wight is seen as a really key point for linking up the populations with Europe, the English population. So it's really not about the Isle of Wight, it's more of the south coast reintroduction. Headlines like this: linking up populations, allowing that movement. We're already getting eagles in the New Forest, so juveniles are coming across from the continent, appearing in the New Forest. Pretty much unknown, people don't realise they're there, they just come here, a few birders will pick up on it. So there are species that spend most of its time at rest, people just don't know they're there. So they've been around for a while, on and off the last 4 or 5 years. But they will get here naturally, they're a slow species to expand, so this is really about speeding up that process. So again, there's an argument whether we should let nature take its course, or we should help it on its way a bit. So again, why the Isle of Wight? It's the last known breeding site for them. 1780, there was a record on Culver Cliff, just around here. Debatable, but they think it's pretty, they're confident that it was white-tailed eagle. Its location will facilitate dispersal along the south coast. and there's significant areas of suitable breeding and wintering habitat. And the New Forest, Poole Harbour, Chichester Harbour, all offer great breeding grounds. So, Isle of Wight, close rich foraging areas, Solent, abundant with fish, and large populations of wintering wildfowl and gulls. And evidence from Denmark supports this. So, Isle of Wight coastline, fantastic. Loads of potential nesting sites, close proximity to the New Forest, and importantly, there's a strong dedicated conservation movement on the island, opposed to perhaps some of the south coast of Hampshire, which is dominated by large estates, perhaps less favourable for an introduction process. So what did the Royal Dennis Foundation do? They held lots of public consultation, lots of responses, and 76% of people in favour of the project. Open up dialogues, key stakeholders, and this is continuing throughout the project. But there are a lot of concerns, public concerns. Would the squirrels eat all the barred squirrels? Would people's cats and dogs go missing? Would children be carried off? Social media was alive with all these comments. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it was all kicking off. And obviously the threat to lambs, partly fueled by journalism. I'm sure you saw the article with the eagle carrying off a lamb. So that added fuel to the social media storm and the public debate. That photo of the eagle carrying off the lambs proved to be doctored at a later date. So, but what the Royal Dennis Foundation were really good at was listening to all these concerns, speaking to farmer groups, the NFU, the CLA, taking these concerns and going away and doing their research. So they went to Netherlands to look at comparable habitat, so in terms of rural economy, urban connotation, similar habitat, and importantly for us, wildlife, particularly the wildfowl waders, SPA features. So the Wildlife Trust, we were excited about this proposal, a little bit hesitant. It divided opinion amongst our staff, our volunteers, and crucially our members as well. So our members are very passionate, and there's a divided opinion as to whether this project is right for the island. So we sat on the fence a bit, and we took criticism from both sides of doing that, but we wanted to be in no doubt that this reintroduction would have a negative impact. So, and as I said, the Royal Dennis Foundation were good at going away and addressing these concerns. One of my key concerns was the impact on the SPA. So we've got 3 SPAs in the Solent, important sites for wintering waders and wildfowl, crucial areas for overwintering break geese. We've been banging on for years about recreational disturbance impacting these sites. And here we are potentially endorsing another disturbance factor. So we wanted to be sure that this was, the evidence was there to support that this would not have a detrimental impact on the SPA. So the research the Royal Dennis Foundation came back with from the Netherlands showed that there was unlikely to be a negative impact. Most of our wintering wildfowl and waders, they're cohabited with these eagles. They understand the behaviour of the eagles. They migrate and breed in areas where these eagles exist, so it's not going to be a massive issue. So from that, they came back, addressed a lot of concerns. Concerns for farmers, obviously lambing is a big issue. There are parallels with the Netherlands, but in the Netherlands they tend to lamb indoors, whereas most of the lambing on the Isle of Wight takes place outside. So there's still going to be concerns, there's still going to be issues, and they can still be addressed. So, feasibility study was commissioned, produced. Licence application went into Natural England. Licence was granted. A licence to take birds from Scotland was given by Scottish Natural Heritage, and eagles appeared on the island in June of this year. So 6 individuals were pulled down, 4 females, 2 males. They were hefted on a secret location on the north coast of the island, probably one of the worst secret locations in the world. There we go. So yeah, 6 birds left there. They were in pens, and they were released in August. The initial release date was slightly messed up by the fact that it was Cows Week, and it decided that the massive sailing event was probably not the best time to release the eagles. So the eagles have been released. They're now out in the wild, and to be honest, the first few weeks did not a lot really. So a few of them moved around. Most of them have been hefted to the release site. This is the big female, they've affectionately called Pavement Crusher by the volunteers. She's so big, and she stayed relatively close to the release pen. So public perception at this time was, what are they going to do? Where are they? We're not seeing them. What's happening? And then slowly but surely, photos started to emerge. So you can see on this one the satellite tag on this bird at the top here. So I've got a really funny story about the satellite tag, which I will relay later in the pub. But so the hope was to be able to release the satellite tracking data so the public could get an understanding of where these birds are going and what they're doing. Sadly, they spent a lot of their time on private land, so they have not been able to release that data as of yet. But it has provided some nice stories. Again, that's another one of the island birds. Local photographers getting inspired. Of course, these are all over social media and drumming up a lot of positive messaging from them. This is really exciting and really timely. So this red line represents the route of one of the male birds. This is a bird nicknamed Culver. And over the course of a few days, this bird travelled up through Hampshire and up to London, up into Kent, back round the coast and back through Sussex, and then came back to the island. So this answered a lot of critics who were saying these birds are just going to disappear straight away and not come back. So this bird is hefted and has come back to the island. Fantastic story. 2 birds in central London sort of flying over. You know, it's amazing. It's just, and it's really perfect. And again, added loads of positivity. The humble buzzard. So we're getting loads of reports of eagles. Most of them are buzzards. So you know, only 50 knocked that. But actually, I find that really inspiring. And to me, that says that people are looking up in the skies and seeing these birds for the first time. So that's a real positive message. It doesn't matter that they've got it wrong. The fact is they've been inspired by a bird. And that's what it's all about, getting people on board. So where do we go from this? What's next? So, you know, this bird has captured people's imagination. You know, reintroductions are the big thing. We, the Trust, have massive inspirations. We're increasing our landholding on the island. You know, we're keen that Vvip, one of the great environmental engineers, come back and restore some wetland restoration. We're looking at feasibility of a sail bunting reintroduction. There's mention of chough, there's mention of wildcat. It's really been a catalyst for getting things going. And now that the public have been on this journey with the eagle, we're hoping they'll get on board with these other potential species that we can reintroduce. And we're also going to use this to drive habitat management, habitat change, enhancement. So there's lots of positivity around this. We've got our own wilder strategy, and this is feeding in lovely to that. So again, positive messaging. I think the key thing for me is once you see these birds in flight, you can't fail to be inspired, and I think that goes for everyone, even the critics. This is a bird with an 8-foot wingspan, you know, 2.5 metres. Females can weigh 7.5 kilos, and they're just majestic and unmistakable in flight. So let's use this as a catalyst. Let's use this to inspire the next generation of young people to get involved with their local environment and see this as a real positive and not as a negative. You know, it's in its infancy. Sure, it's going to be a bumpy ride. 4 or 5 years' time, these guys are going to be breeding, and then we may face a whole different scenario of problems. Will they have an impact on lambing? I don't think so. Will they displace the behaviour of other problems for lamb? So we've got issues with corvids, buzzards, foxes. How will that interaction work out? It's going to be fascinating. So over the course of the next 4 years, the intention is to reach 12 birds each year, and then the project will really step into gear. They're looking at a survival rate of around 40 to 50% of these birds. So the natural mortality is quite high, but I think they'll do well in the south coast opposed to how they've done in Scotland. Yeah, it's just going to be an amazing experience, an amazing project to be involved in. Thank you.
And see those birds back in Jersey.
Thank you, Charles. Yes, my first inter-island meeting was actually the one here in Alderney, which I think was back in 2012, where I came with my boss, Glyn Young, who's going to be here on Saturday, and I had this crazy idea to present to you about reintroducing choughs. I'm now proud to say that I can stand here and tell you we've done it. That's Charles, I've just given you a pat back. To say we've done it, and how we've done it, and the lessons learned. I appreciated yesterday, I thought, oh God, I thought everyone would be bored about me talking about choughs. So I've not really gone into the background too much. And then I saw all these new faces. And I'm like, oh. The get out clause is that we have a website you can go to learn about the stuff I don't talk about today. And the project is part of a wider project called Birds on the Edge. So the website is birdsontheedge.org. As Charles said, but this is a partnership between Durrell, the National Trust for Jersey, and the Natural Environment team, with our aim to try and restore, through active management, the farmland habitat in Jersey, where we've seen bird numbers decline, or in the case of the chough that's made 100 years ago, go completely extinct. And as you'd expect with a project with that sort of ambition, it involves several interconnecting components, which all sort of, work together in some respect. And so mainly National Trust are focusing on the habitat work, Durrell with our expertise working on the chough reintroduction. And the chough is really seen as the flagship for this project. Kind of to sum it all up, the problem with the farmland in Jersey is that it used to be having livestock on it for wool industry. That was removed, bracken has grown up, nothing can grow underneath the bracken, so there's no insect communities. Birds that rely on insects, like the red-billed chough, who is solely looking for insects in the soil or in dung, will die out. And so it's very hard to sell a program saying, let's clear the bracken, but if we can use the acrobatic, charismatic bird to push it forward, then we hope that this can drive the work. So this is the red-billed chough in Jersey. And I'm pleased to say that we kind of followed the plan that we put forward in 2012. So we knew that they'd been extinct on the island. They haven't been seen in any of the Channel Islands since the turn of the 20th century. There is a population in Westlawn and Brittany, and when we started the project, there was a population now in Cornwall, but there's never any transfer, there's no birds going over. So we knew we had to physically bring them back. So we started a captive breeding program at Jersey Zoo, in collaboration with Paradise Park Cornwall, who've been breeding choughs for many years, with the idea the birds we breed we release into the wild. They're bred at the zoo. We take them to a release aviary at Sorrel on the north coast, where they stay there for a certain period of time. If the birds have come over from the UK, they have to do a 30-day quarantine. That 150 days is for the very first trial, where we plan to do the release in May, and then we had Jersey's worst snow on record, and then the birds molted off their radio transmitters. There's a bit of a delay, so that's a bit of an anomaly in terms of range, but they're held in that aviary so they can acclimatise to the coastal conditions, they can see their surroundings, and then they can learn from each other before the release and learn what we want them to do as well. So in total, between 2013, autumn 2013 to 2018, we've done about 8 releases of 43 birds. We've released them in small social cohorts, which is very important for a bird like the chough. It's a social bird, they learn from each other. And I always describe it as the first day going into school or into a new job. If you've got friends with you, you're likely to survive. You shouldn't die on your first day at work, by the way. So it's a prerequisite, but you get through it better. In the case of the chough, it may be a matter of life or death. And this bit, tagged at the bottom, has been really crucial to this project and to any other projects that you look at in terms of reintroduction. That we've supported them with supplementary feed. We still do to this day. Veterinary care pre and post release. We're very fortunate to have a vet team at Durrell, and the intensive monitoring, which has involved going from the start with radio tracking for those that release, to the daily monitoring when we do supplementary feed, to going around following up public sightings. So we knew in our plan that we wanted to release young birds. We actually got a bit of stick from some other organisations saying, why release young birds, they should be older. Unfortunately, we didn't get to do that at the start, so it's almost we had to prove it, because we had a little bit of a snag with captive breeding, and we had to use birds that were 1 to 2 years of age. So choughs are sexually mature around 3, 4, so it's a bit like using teenagers. After the next few years, we were able to use younger birds, as in the case of this one, which is one of our hand-reared birds that we finish hand-rearing in the aviary, and they fledge from the aviary. As we kind of expected, we did find a difference that those older birds that we release have less chance of survival than the younger birds. It's a bit like going back to George's talk last night in terms of statistics. We did release more juveniles than we did adults, but actually if you break it down, the adult birds, we tend to lose those at the very start of the release, whereas the younger birds manage to get through maybe 6 months before something natural may have happened to them and they disappeared. But still, that's a very good high survival rate. And that's where, because of the supplementary feeding and post-release monitoring, we've been really successful with this project. And you know, the birds have stayed with us on the whole, except for the bird at the top who's about to go out. So yeah, the stats I've taken there, what we've looked at is the first year is the tricky year, in fact, the first 2 weeks. Once they got through that, they've got a good chance. So assuming they survived that first year, what is the survival rate for the next years for the birds out in the wild? And I was actually quite shocked when I did the maths the other week for the publication which we were just putting together, that it's actually 93%. So it's been really high up to 2018. I may or may not talk about 2019. We'll see what happens. It's a very profound statement. Mortality is natural. We know the causes of death. For a chough, I should say, if a chough disappears from the area, generally it means that they've gone. It's not that they've moved away, they're dead. And what tends to happen is that with the pairs, if another bird comes in and pushes out one of the birds in that pairing, they lose their roost site, they lose their territory, and they just sort of perish and disappear. The Cornish birds had that. The very first pair that came back in 2001, 15, 16 years later, a younger male came into the territory, and then the male disappeared, and then after a year or two, the female disappeared. So that's the premise, and because we haven't heard from Alderney or Soanes from Guernsey to say that we've got choughs, we're also assuming they're not anywhere else in the islands. So if we lose a chough, we assume it's dead. I mentioned the vet team. We are able to do post-mortems. I have had funny looks from the vet team when I presented a head of a chough, or a headless body of a chough, or going into the rings. Somebody did recover a pair of legs out at Sorrel with the rings on. I sent them into the museum. But we know that there's actually a known cause of death. It's 3. Starvation has generally happened at, like I said, the very first 2 weeks, when a bird is not necessarily hasn't bonded well with others. It's become overwhelmed. It's found itself in a situation where it feels trapped and doesn't end up getting enough food. But starvation can link into all these other things. So aspergillus is a fungal infection, a fungal and environmental thing. I think that is born out of the birds who use in the quarry. You can have aspergillus, but of course, if you're not getting enough food, then it just makes it worse and then you die. Same with predation. We had, I can't remember who it was, but it was one of the birders doing a migratory watch at Troll Point, called in to say he's just seen a peregrine take a chough. I think that's on my birthday as well. So we know it's a peregrine took it, but that actual individual, when we look back at the records, that bird had been presenting with a parasitic infection. And so we knew that of the group, it was the week 1, it got picked off. And of course, so basically, they're what we found, but of course, it's all interlinked. Saying that, 63%, we don't actually know, they're just gone. And that's happened this year. We've lost 10 adults from the group where we just don't know what's happened to them. We've had 1 who is disease related, and we've lost a few of the fledglings. But that's why with a project like this, you have to aim to release more birds than you think are going to be surviving. So we aim to release 30 to 50, and as I said, we released 43. Those that did get a chance to fly around, that's red dot up there, that's the release site at Sorrel. And then it seems that west is best, with the old Josie saying. Yeah, that's down to topography, nothing personal to the Eastern Islanders. Yeah, they go into the northwest and to the southwest. It's where it's higher elevation, you've got the cliffs, what they're looking for. But it's quite interesting that that's the side that they're going to. We are, and I have seen myself, seen them flying over the east side and the centre of the island, but we haven't actually seen them down on the ground feeding or on the cliff face. It's always flying. So as far as we know, it's these foraging sites that they're sticking to. And what we're seeing is that some birds will stay close to that territory, to the release sites as their territory. Some birds will go the 7 kilometres west and back in the day and have that sort of range. So it's quite interesting because choughs normally it's just a couple of kilometres that they're going to be ranging. We knew from the UK populations what sort of habitat they'll be looking for. It's quite interesting to see what they pick in Jersey. This, for those of you not familiar, this is the northwest coast. So we've got Roehampton ruins, the long racecourse, wonderful St. Mons Bay. And this is just perfect chough habitat. Not perfect for release sites. It's not, the release site we chose was National Trust land and have an aviary. But it's got the short grass land for insect communities to grow and develop and to for the birds to then feed. Racecourse has the horse paddocks, and it's also got the racecourse itself is kept short, and for spectators, the grass is kept short. So you've got horse manure as well as the short grass. You have cows in the middle of it. It's Jersey, why not? And that is another source of food for them. They love dung beetle larvae. Then we're also looking for this sort of mosaic habitat because that really helps the insect life that they're looking for. And then they nest in caves, crevices. So this sort of cliff structure is perfect for them. And they play, they love to play for fun. They're flying around in the thermals and the winds. And so you can imagine that this sort of coastline is just perfect for them. There is another feature of this area, which we've sort of anecdotally proven, is that whilst it's quite popular for people to go up and walk their dogs and visit, it gets minimal disturbance compared to the southwest of the island, where you have the coachloads of tourists coming down and cars parking up and the ice cream van. We had a pair try to stay down that southwest end of the island last year, and you'd see them feeding and foraging around Correy and looking perfectly good choughs. But then they'd be flying all the way back to the release site for the afternoon supplementary feed to get some extra food, to then fly straight back in half an hour to the south. And unfortunately, we've now lost the female from that group, and the male has come back to the north end of the island, is now staying around the north end. So that to me suggests that there are factors at play down the southwest where the habitat's not great. Could be the insects just aren't there, but I also you see the fact that people around, like Chris was talking about, birds get scared up into the air, they come back down again. Whilst it might not be fatal in the long term, losing that energy and having to find more food, it does make a difference to choughs. As well as our support with the population to help it through, the breeding in the wild has been a great success for us. It started within the first year of their release. We put up nest boxes for the birds on the principle that captive reared birds will look for the same box or nest they're reared in. And like I said, in the first year of being out, they did that. Totally ignored those boxes though, and they went for sites in Roehampton Correy. The sites they chosen were not the rock face, it's the actual big, huge building warehouse structures, which are like giant caves to them. And that's where they chose to nest. And pleased to say our first chick, as I think we've talked about before, was in 2015, Dusty fledged. This collection of slides, I like to call a day out with Dave. Dave Buxton, one of the four now ringers, helping us with this project, where we go and monitor the nests, we ring chicks in the nest, we also get DNA samples for sexing. This photo in the middle, this shows Dave up a ladder in a nest box where the pair had bred successfully 1 year in this building. Then they chose to nest on hot pipes where their eggs were cooked that season. They repeated that the second season, cooked again. So working with Correy staff, we put the box up, we restricted access to those pipes, and the birds went in the box and they had 3 chicks this year, fledged. So that's really helped as well. When they're fledged and they're flying around the quarry, it takes about a week before the parents bring them back to Sorrel, the supplementary feeding site, and because they're ringed, we can tell who they're from, and we can monitor their progress. We've had difficulty this year because we've mistimed it with some of the nests. We've had to do the ringing at the aviary itself, which Chris will show. Well, it's a fun day, wasn't it, Chris? Lots of birds to ring and catching up. The big news this year is that we've seen successful range expansion. We saw the pair over at Plymouth. They tried last year, but this year they succeeded in fledging a chick from their nest. That pair will stay at Plymouth during the year. They don't really bother coming back to the aviary for supplementary food. They do come back though when they have a very hungry fledged chick asking for food, and so that was nice to see. And as we expected, because we're adding more birds and becoming more mature, we get more pairs, more breeding success. This year was really great, but yeah, this graph shows the birds we've actually lost, and this year we've lost quite a few, we think, to peregrines and gulls. So the next step is, this is boring bit, sorry, it's strategy planning for the next few years, because we're now focusing on protecting these birds in the wild, seeing how we can help the habitat, and working that into our rewilding strategy with Durrell, and our Jersey rewilding strategy. What we've been doing basically, it's choughs and our agile frog work, and working on that more. But it's also taking these lessons and feeding them into the programs. So what I've been working with this year is IIEM. They were actually the first to look at supplementary feeding wild choughs for increasing success of survival over winter. We took that work, put it into our project. They're now coming back to us because they're still seeing problems, even though that habitat looks brilliant, you know, dung, short grass, they're still having problems in breeding, is one, because it's a small population. But what they've realised, we all know pesticides kill insects, so that has a problem. In the chough world, we've also known that ivermectins, wormers that are used with livestock, have an impact on the insects. What they've been finding this year is that there's also other veterinary treatments that are having a knock-on effect, and that's what they think is the problem in Isla, because they don't use ivermectins on that habitat in Isla, but they have seen this issue, and this is something I'd like to explore for Jersey. Skipping back down, Kent and Isle of Wight, we're looking at trying to reintroduce the choughs there where they were historically, and if they would like we've done with Birds on the Edge, use the chough to help chalk grassland restoration. And then English Heritage had a bit of an aneurysm when they had the idea of, told about the idea of putting them in Dover Castle. But yeah, that's that one to put them back burner for now. And then further afield, we have also helped with the Hawaiian crow advisory kind of role. Unfortunately, get to go out there, but it's using the same principles basically of captive rearing, the techniques that we found from the work with Paul Birds, and applying them to save a species in the wild. So because I've got the 1 minute timer, I'm going to go very quickly through making this a summary. And again, get out clause, please visit our website, Birds on the Edge, if you have any questions and want to speak to me later.
Thank you very much, Liz. It's just wonderful to see that work, sort of pooling out and going into other regions from our small island. Our fifth presentation, I apologise if I get the name wrong here, is from Farah, Mukhida from Anguilla National Trust, Dr. Louise Soanes from the University of Roehampton, and Susan Zaluski from Jost Dyke Preservation Society, who are going to talk about pest eradication, including rats and goats, we haven't heard much about goats, in Anguilla and BBI, and also the subsequent bird recovery that's happened after that eradication. Over to you.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I'm Louise, and I represent the Anguilla National Trust, and this is Susan, who is representing the Jost Dyke Preservation Society, and someone who will meet as well. Yeah, at the back. As we just introduced, we're just going to be talking about our Caribbean seabirds and our seabird islands, and what we've been doing over the last few years. So, following Charlie already shown a map like this, just to show where the Caribbean Oversea Territories are. It's quite good, really, that Bermuda is often grouped in Caribbean territories as well. And we have a huge number of endemics compared to Britain and the British mainland. There are a few of them, and as Charlie and Paul mentioned earlier, many of them are threatened, endangered, or critically endangered. So I'm here going to talk about Anguilla specifically. Anguilla is one of the most heavily distributed Lesser Antilles. We have a population of about 12,000 people, about 91 kilometers square. And we have one large mainland Anguilla, that's the only inhabited part of the island. But we have some offshore keys which are really, really good for biodiversity. We have Freaky Peggies, Dog Island, and Sombrero. These are the islands that the Anguilla National Trust predominantly work on. We also have Squab Island over here. And these are all uninhabited. So I'm just going to talk a bit about each of the keys and what they're doing on that. So Dog Island, it was once described by some visitors as from the RSPB as the Galapagos of the Caribbean. It's a really special place. It's got globally important populations of brown bluegill, red-billed chocolate birds, and huge numbers of sooty terns, more than 100,000 breeding pairs every summer. So it's quite special when you see them all around the local colony. Also, regionally important populations of frigate birds, bridal terns, masked bluebills, least tern, and shearwater. It's also home to an endangered reptile species, the Anguilla Banks skink, and it's a designated marine protected area. Prickly pear they're also an IBA, also internationally recognised. Important populations of boobies, laughing gulls, noddies, bridal terns, and petrels. It's also recently become a lesser Antillean iguana sanctuary because we translocated individuals from mainland Anguilla over to here. And it's also a marine protected area. And Sombrero Island, it's a bit further away from the mainland. Not many people visit there. It was mined for phosphates in the 1800s, so it's a very unique landscape, lots of big holes where they used to extract the phosphorus. And it was a manned lighthouse for a long time until the 1900s. And it's home to important populations of masked bluebills, brown bluebills, bridal terns, noddies, and a very special endemic and endangered Sombrero ground lizard, only found on that island. It's also part of Anguilla's first Ramsar site that was designated a few years ago. So what are we doing on these islands to help protect our seabirds and the other endemic species? We all know, maybe you attended Biz's talk yesterday, rats and mice are basic species are one of the main problems for island species. So in 2012, the Anguilla National Trust led an eradication of the black rat on Dog Island. In 2018, black rats were eradicated from the Freaky Pear Keys. And in 2020, we should be eradicating mice from Sombrero. And Bizban, who many of you saw yesterday, led these eradications. This is a map that Biz produced. This is just showing how the rats can be affecting seabird populations. These areas in red and yellow show where the densest populations of rats on the island before the eradication, during the eradication, and those areas also are the main seabird breeding areas. So you can see rats were very closely related to the seabird populations on the island. And we started to see some populations recovering from Dog Island. We've seen more ground lizards, more tree lizards. The vegetation is changing quite dramatically. Land birds have increased. It's a bit slower to see the increase in seabirds. They just take a bit longer to recover, but we are seeing more shearwaters. So in time, we're going to see a lot more positive changes on these islands. Once an eradication is being completed, it's quite a lot of intensive effort for several months to eradicate the rats, and then they're gone, and it's really great. But you can't just leave it at that. We can't just think the islands will just recover. We have to continuously check in these islands to prevent any reinvasions. These islands are visited by boats, some more than others, so there's a fair chance a pregnant rat can just hop off a boat, get back on the islands, and then that's it. All our efforts are wasted. So we actually have permanent bait stations all around the islands. This is Dog Island. I think there's about 170 bait stations. So about every 6 weeks, we have to go out to Dog Island with the Freaky Pear Keys and replace baits in these stations. So if a rat does reinvade, hopefully it will eat that bait and not breed or spread further. So it's a long-term commitment. Once you've completed eradication, you have to commit to continued biosecurity. But at the same time, we do this bait station monitoring. We combine it with monitoring the seabirds, monitoring of the important turtle populations. We have big populations of hawksbills and greens and occasional leatherbacks on the islands. So we make the most of our trips and we do a lot of monitoring out there. More recently as well, we started trying to improve the habitat in other ways, for example, through artificial nest sites. These are the red-billed tropic birds, and they normally nest under boulders or in crevices. After the storms in 2017, we noticed that probably the sea swells had come over their main breeding site and washed away some of the boulders, changed the habitat a bit, and we found birds nesting out in the open, which leaves them open to predation. We're seeing a lot of carcasses that have been predated by pelicans, we thought we had to do something, so we tried to create some artificial nest sites. This is a fiberglass mold covered in rock, cemented on. And we put them out last summer, and we had our first tropic bird in there this year, so that's really exciting. So that's a bit about habitat restoration in Anguilla. We still have other issues to deal with. We have goats on Dog Island, which obviously have a huge impact on the vegetation structure. Unfortunately, Dog Island is privately owned, and the landowner isn't supportive at all of removing goats. People like to hunt goats in the Caribbean, so it's quite good. We get a lot of well, Susan will tell you, people wouldn't be happy with removing goats. Coastal development is probably the major threat. Dog Island and the 50 keys are privately owned, so they could be developed at any time. In the last few years, there's been two proposals two persons or developers interested in developing Dog Island. One of them was a cruise ship that leave during base. So if that happened, that would just wipe out the Galapagos of the Caribbean. And we've also got to be careful of other invasive species, for example, green iguana, invasive plants, rats, as I said before. Okay. And Susan will just talk a bit about the issues and working with virgin islands.
So I work for the Jost Van Dyke Preservation Society, which is a locally based NGO in the British Virgin Islands. We are an archipelago of 43 islands, islets, and rocky outcrops. Jost Van Dyke is just right here. We have three important bird areas for the British Virgin Islands, and we're nestled in between two on Jost Van Dyke. This is actually Roetown here, which is sort of where the center of the population of the BVI lives. So for us being an out island NGO, it makes a lot of sense that we would concentrate on what's the biodiversity around us. And we have a very good working relationship with our National Parks Trust, so we have several co-management arrangements with some of these islands. Jost Van Dyke, it's about 3 square miles. It's approximately the same size as Alderney, but we have just 300 persons. And the IBIEs around us, which I'm about to discuss, have globally important populations of roseate terns and frigate birds.
Did you press up?
Oh, it's up.
No, it should be right.
Okay, so I just go right. Okay. So one of the first things, obviously, we had an idea of where our globally important areas were, but having your population of humans and also wildlife spread out across 43 keys. One of the projects that Louise and I worked on together, which was a Darwin-funded project, was to do a BVI seabird recovery program. And we did comprehensive BVI seabird census, and that involved going out over 2 years, both winter and summer breeding seasons, and looking for our 15 breeding species. So these are some of the examples. Obviously, we mentioned the frigate bird, which is globally important, but we have regionally important populations of several of our other species. It's just that they're not necessarily all together. They're spread out in smaller colonies across those 43 islands. This is Great Tobago Island. It's recognized as both an IBA and a key biodiversity area. It's an extremely steep, hilly, cactus-covered island. It's 263 acres, and it's home to the Western Hemisphere's third largest magnificent frigate bird colony with about 900 breeding pairs. It's also an important site for Audubon shearwater, red-billed tropic birds, and brown boobies. And it's home to several threatened endemic plant species and has adjacent marine protected areas with very well-preserved stands of endangered elkhorn corals. One of the major issues facing the seabird colony on Great Tobago has been massive overgrazing by goats. If you actually look at that first photo there, it almost looks like a road has been cut through the island. That's actually a landslide that was caused by overgrazing, which makes the hillsides extremely unstable. And then this here is actually a tree that came down in that landslide. And it's a little bit hard to tell, but these are all frigate bird nests. And what happened is the tree actually got caught up in that landslide and went down to the water's edge. You could actually see the dead birds got caught up in that tree. So it's a pretty severe problem that probably just in that one landslide, one summer, I think that was about 2012, caused the loss of about 200 nests. So obviously we're looking at island restorations. We also are looking at rats in the next project, but we've done quite a bit of work on the control and eradication of goats on these islands, starting with this, which was one of our most important sites. Lots of practical experience tells us that the density of goats on offshore keys is usually 1 per acre. We found that certainly wasn't to be true, and we had a density of probably 3 to 4 animals per acre. And we've moved, I think we removed something over 1,200 animals at this point, and we still have several dozen that are left on the island. We had a couple of internationally funded projects for this, with our National Parks Trust as the lead. The EU Best project from 2013 to 15 was a regional project that was pulled together by RSPB. Then we also followed up with a Darwin Plus project later on, which was focused at actually consolidating local capacity. So RSPB was very influential in helping us bring in international partners, such as, I always get this wrong, it's Farah. We knew it as Farah when we started the project, but they're actually animal health and veterinarian laboratories now. So they were really important in bringing that together. And then after our National Parks Trust wardens were trained, we wanted to make sure that we didn't have to always rely on bringing in foreign experts. So we had a follow-up project that just focused on making sure that this is a routinized part of what we do with our conservation work. In addition to Great Tobago, we've added in 55-acre Little Tobago, Green Key at 15 acres, and Prickly Pear. So we've got goat control programs going on as a regular part of our conservation work in the BVI now. The other IBA immediately to our east is a small 15-acre key known as Green Key. And it's home to one of the most important roseate tern breeding sites in the BVI. Our regional population of roseate terns is about 2,000 pairs. And in some years, we've had up to 1,500 pairs of roseates on this one island. Problem with roseate terns in the Caribbean, or at least in the Puerto Rican Bay, is they use all of the keys like a network. So each year they choose any one of 27 potential nesting islands across the Virgin Islands. And so it makes it very difficult to monitor and manage them. So we know that rats is a threat on several of the small islands. So we're looking at, we prioritize which islands we're going to work on, and we started eradicating rats from several of them. This is an example. So these sites show, obviously there's certain sites that they favor. So we kind of look at, basically we're looking at this as a system-wide plan and which islands we can prioritize. Lots of times when prioritization plans are done for invasive species, we're looking at them on a global scale. So we've actually in the BVI started to look at things in terms of a national priority, what's the low-hanging fruit, which are the easy islands to eradicate from. And one of the things with roseate terns is they breed across the BVI and US Virgin Islands, so it requires some international cooperation with monitoring. The US Virgin Islands Department of Parks and Natural Resources has been monitoring since 1993. And so we've kind of come into that, but at least this is one of the few species in the BVI that we actually have data sets going back. For the most part, we have very little fisheries data. So seabirds at least can give us some idea what's going on in the oceans, but first we have to stabilize the threats that are in their colonies. So to go looking at that control and eradication of rats, it's logistically challenging and expensive, but we've managed to get through on several small islands. Rat eradication has been achieved on 5-acre West Seal Dog, 3-acre East Seal Dog. Long-term rat control has been implemented on Green Key using a combination of bait and mechanical traps. These are the good nature traps out of New Zealand. Sandy Key is not a bird colony, but it's been rat-free since 2002. That's 15 acres, and we help to manage that. And then we've also got some other programs coming up in the future of Tiny Island, which is just 3 acres, but it's an important site for roseate terns, and then some larger rat eradication programs at Great Tobago. Also, we've definitely found that we do a lot of game camera monitoring, and we found that in a lot of cases, we think that one invasive species is the main threat to a seabird colony, but sometimes we get out there and by monitoring, we actually find out that it's pretty much all of the invasive species. And for example, in the case of our roseate terns, we had originally started out saying, okay, well, we know that there's predation by rats, we've seen broken eggs, so we knew that was a problem, but then when we actually got the game cameras out, we found a large herd of goats was actually trampling through the colony, so it just reinforced the idea that, usually getting rid of these invasive species is beneficial for your target species that you're trying to conserve. And then I'm going to kind of switch this over to Louise, who became the first way we got involved together was looking at threats at sea to some of our seabirds.
Yeah, so just briefly, you've seen what we're doing on the land, trying to protect the seabird breeding sites and the islands in general, but we also got to think about what's going on at sea. You've got to do both. And this partly came out of some work Susan did. She went to the colony on Great Tobago in 2011, I think, and she found 60 dead frigate birds entangled in monofilament fishing line in the colony. So it was mostly juveniles, wasn't it? I think the adults had been fishing around fishing boats. Then maybe the fishermen just cut the line or let go of the line, and then coming back feeding their juveniles on fish that had a broken line in it. So we thought, okay, let's try and find out where they're feeding, what are the hotspots, and then we can maybe work towards conserving those. So we started a project with Liverpool University. We tracked, we used a variety of different loggers, different sized birds for the tiny birds like this. This is a GPS log on of the tail of a brown booby, and for the largest frigate bird, we used satellite and GSM loggers. So we tracked over 200 seabirds, representing 5 different species. This is a map of a frigate bird from Great Barrier and BVI. So the green is the breeding site here, and this is where they travel over probably a 3-month period. Once they've finished sleep, so they're going to Jamaica, Cuba, down to Colombia. Once they're really wide-ranging movements. This is more local foraging. This is a sooty term from Dog Island. It's a very small term, but in just 24 hours, this bird came like more than 100 kilometers away from the breeding colony and then back again. So huge foraging distances, and obviously crossing a lot of international boundaries. They're not just foraging in Anguilla's waters, they're foraging throughout the Caribbean, which has problems for conservation, because we have to try and talk to all of the different territory warden. Almost there. But what we can do with these tracks, which is really interesting, is identify marine imported bird areas. So we know they're imported bird areas. We've got the terrestrial sites. We can also use the foraging tracks to identify marine imported bird areas. And BirdLife International developed a tool which allows you to extract foraging areas from foraging trips. So generally, tropical seabirds forage at the end of their foraging trips. So they just extract out that foraging area rather than get rid of all the commuting distances. So we can get a better idea of what they're actually doing at sea, where are the real important areas. And then the tool overlays all of the foraging trips from every bird, every species if you want, and creates foraging hotspots. So that's a bit more useful, and then you can extract down just this is where a lot of the trips overlap here, the red and the blue areas. So then you can extract those areas, and these kind of layers, map layers, are really useful for marine spatial planning or in local or international conservation planning. Instead of having a big map like this, which covers quite a wide area, you can really highlight the important foraging areas, scale it down a bit. So we've done that for Anguilla, for different species and different islands, and we hope they will be incorporated in marine spatial plans as and when they're made. And more recently, University of Liverpool has scaled up this work, not just from BVI and Anguilla, but also included Cayman Islands, Mexico, Florida. This is again magnificent frigate birds. These have got GSM loggers on, especially designed by Phil Atkinson here from the BTO. They're really cool loggers. They're solar panelled. They transmit the signals by mobile phone network. Phil will know more. We'll describe this more. But they're really cool, so they can potentially last a long time on the birds because they're solar panelled. They'll last as long as they stay attached to the bird, so you can get some really interesting long-term movements of these. And the guys at Liverpool have been looking a bit more in depth into the tracks, looking at the differences between males and females, difference in foraging areas, and also between adults and juveniles, just to try and see if there are any differences, and trying to highlight regional foraging hotspots. So we've got a lot of project partners. We've got most of our funding, Darwin Initiative, Best, EU Best have been really good sources of funding. A huge number of project partners that this work wouldn't be possible with. Okay, so that's a bit of a summary of what we've been doing.
Well, that was inspiring. In some ways it's quite pressing. You see the challenges that you're facing, particularly in terms of development and pests. But I suppose we have to take heart from the fact that organisations like yourselves are there. And if you weren't there, imagine how good it would be. So, good stretch your elbow, and I hope that those development proposals never happen. That would be absolutely Okay. So we have a quarter of an hour for questions. It might be helpful if our speakers just on the edge here. So we've got quite a range. So, do we have any questions from the audience? And if you'd ask who you'd like to get that question to.
Yeah, I want Louise. I just wondered if you followed up those when you identified the important quality areas using like computer stuff. Did you follow up with sort of those surveys as well? Just to check, see if the birds might do anything different there or if there's something different about the ocean.
We haven't really got the.
Is it worth doing?
Resources. It could be, yeah. So doing boat transects would be good. Susan actually did quite a comprehensive survey of fishes in the BBI about how many seabirds they were catching and where their foraging areas were. So we have got some information like that from the BBI.
Auditing.
Yeah. It's also quite hard. I did try and map important fishing areas, but it's really hard to. Fishermen don't really want to tell people like us where they're fishing because we don't stop them fishing. So yeah, we'd have to do it independently. Yeah.
And then in the British Virgin Islands, we also have an issue that we have the boundary between the USVI and the BVI, and so they feel like it's trading secret rights for territory.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah. Impressed by the number of partners you've got in the Caribbean. Do you think that the American connection is assisting you in finding sponsorship and help in these projects?
I think it does in the British Virgin Islands because they're so closely more.
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of our, like, if we have private donors, our private capital comes from the US, but most of our partners tend to be UK based. And for this project, almost all of them were entirely UK. I think we had one US university.
That's about the chough. At what level would the population become self-sustainable?
That's part of the boring strategy plan bit at the moment. But that's what's been interesting about this year is that we're seeing, the adults disappearing. I think that's to do with the younger ones coming up of age, and we still have this imbalance of fewer males than females, and seeing things like the peregrines and the gull situation. There's lots of breeding gulls in the quarry. That's been an issue, not so much for competition of food, but just the aggressiveness of the gulls that are there.
Next slide.
Can I ask you?
There we go. Warming up.
I've got another one. I must be ignorant in these things. How do you get rid of these mice? What is the practical thing? Is it just done by trapping, or do you do any chemical systems or in breeding systems to get rid of mice?
It will all be done by poison bait. Poison bait. So that the island we might have every 20. Is it going to be every 20 meters first? Every 10 meters there'll be a bait station put down with bait in it, and every day that bait station will be checked and the bait replaced, and that could go on for maybe 8 to 12 weeks until you no longer see the signs of the mice. So all of the eradication will be done by bait, except for in the BBI, Susan has been trying this mechanical,
Which that's had mixed results, but we are fortunate in the Caribbean in that the islands that we're working in don't have any native mammals, and the bait that we use is a slow-acting anticoagulant. So it pretty much, if there's uptake by other species, it doesn't impact them.
Can I just state that I used to come to Alderney a long time ago and got involved with rodents. And a young lady called Louise was based from here, and a wonderful amount of. We have lots of political arguments where people say there's no point in protesting if you're only a little island. And Louise, you proved that you can do anything we want. And congratulations, it's been absolutely lovely to see you and the amount of work you're doing. Thank you very much.
I'm glad you got that right.
Off the back of the original work, did you ever look at plastic ingestion? Is anybody
No,
looking at plastic ingestion in seabirds within their area?
We haven't done that.
No.
People are interested in it.
And I'm gonna actually start doing it this year because we noticed like we've got a project, and we tend to, because we don't have huge staffs and budgets, we piggyback a lot of projects. So we're gonna be continuing some frigate bird tracking this year, but I'm trying to actually get a graduate student to look at plastics in brown boobies nests, which we see a lot of, particularly plastic straws. We have a big beach bar industry, so that's definitely the next thing that we're looking at.
Lady from Durrell, I was wondering if there's been any plans or outreach to the other islands of producing choughs, possibly here or Guernsey or even so.
What we'd like, we've talked about it, what we'd like is for the birds to naturally find their way, because it has been very intensive to do this. You know, I've been working at the start of the first year, sort of sunrise to sunset, so to actually replicate it on other islands. And it might not be necessary to replicate it, because at some stage we may hopefully see the birds in Jersey moving over.
RSPB, I share your optimism on the wetland in Montserrat, but you realize this was a golf course inundated by volcanoes and pillaged by miners, and now somebody's trying to make the golf course again, and the idea of the wetland, which is really good. But have any designs on the scope of this?
Hi Claude, good to see you. Yes, so we're aware of the issues, and so basically the approach that we took in the original sort of consultation, so I should have said earlier, I mean, the way that these sites were identified was very much kind of with partner-led consultation, and in Montserrat there was clearly an interest in a number of different sites, so we kind of appraised about 5 different possible areas, including the former Piper's Pond area, which has now obviously been concreted over, and looked at kind of the technical and social feasibility of recreating wetlands on those sites. And I think, I mean, you could probably fairly say that none of them are sort of perfect in terms of where you would, in all things being equal, want to create a wetland. And there's obvious risks, as you say, not just from, I mean, the volcano itself, but also deluges and heavy rain. And we're hopefully going to get someone out there during the wet period to kind of start to look at that. But we're at the very early stages, really, and what the team, so we've got guys from the reserves wetland team going out sort of early part of next year, and it's actually kind of looking at the feasibility. So we're still, I'd say, in the scoping phase. I mean, we know that there's water there. We know that obviously, you know, Dwayne, the developer, has obviously made a start. You know, there's some good signs of what he's done there. But I think we want to do something. Working with him, working with others as well who have you know, an interest in the area, and just it has to be, you know, socially feasible as well as technically feasible, and low risk. But I mean, the idea with the miners, obviously the miners are operating further up the valley, is if we can develop the conversation that's been started with some of them about how they're currently working and how they wind up in terms of you know, finishing what. There's only a couple of years or a number of years worth of reserve, I think, and from what we understand of in the upper reaches. But if through their winding up of the restoration, they can actually redirect possible flows from further up the volcano, that will minimise the risk to the plans for lower down the Bellen Valley as well as the wetland creation. But yeah, there are risks, and I think we recognise that, and I think we're still very much in the scoping phase. But yeah, look forward to talking with you over the next few days about that as well.
Yeah, there's another question for Charlie. I'm sorry, I can't remember which island you were talking about, but you were saying that illegal dumping was causing an issue. Is there anything that you guys are doing, like with the local government or anything, to try and tackle this?
Yeah, so the idea with Wigan, there'll be a significant public awareness campaign. We've got government in as a partner there, and actually the government have already taken some steps in terms of signage, but our partner, the National Trust, will be kind of lit up. It's, you know, one of their major strengths is the public outreach, and they're going to be convening the local community to kind of address and explore some of the issues. And we don't actually know where the source of it is, so we're not making any assumptions about, you know, where that dumping's come from. But it is obviously impacting in terms of, you know, reducing the area of wetland, but also the seepage and other associated issues. So yeah, we are kind of community and government type approach with Wigan.
Yeah, just picking up that Montserrat story again.
we were very pleased that Dwayne, as you mentioned, in the Bellon Valley, been working with us on our Adopt a Home for Wildlife programme, and I think the potential for expanding that in Bellon is very interesting. But equally, I mean, I don't want to attribute anything to anybody else in the room, but I'm aware that in Montserrat there has been resistance to actually doing anything with the Piper's Pond area, which is not concreted over, it's just been filled. And that's probably a wetland with a lot of potential. And I was talking with the National Trust there the other day, whether there was potential within your scheme for looking at progressively opening that up again, because it's the area least affected by volcanic infill, and one could actually widen the remaining stream there progressively to expand it, subject to the government being comfortable with that.
Yes, I mean, like I said, you know, the Piper's Pond was in the mix alongside Fox's Bay and a number of other sites. And I think, you know, the decision will ultimately be taken by, you know, we'll take a lead from our partners. We're there to support them. But the sense that we have in terms of there being a groundwater aquifer and what Dwayne's already done in terms of that first step in that small pond that's being created does give us some confidence in the ability to do something of reasonable scale that maybe I think comparable in terms of area to Piper's Pond, but having seen, yes, it's a lot of fill that would need to be removed from Piper's Pond, and at some extent, and it's unfortunate, obviously, that you know, there was external funding, let's just say, that contributed to that infilling of Piper's Pond. But yeah, I mean, the fact that all of the wetlands have been lost in Montserrat does just give that impetus to what we're trying to do there. And the objective is really to get everything in place, get a sound framework, and get everybody on board. To do something meaningful. I mean, we're probably not going to have a finished wetland by the end of 2021, but we're hopefully going to have significant steps towards that. So yeah.
Yes, just as soon as we opened up any of the ponds in Twain's area, the migrant shorebirds were in, so it's got promise.
One more question.
Hi, just to pick up on the plastics and the effects on seabirds. We had last year in Gibraltar our first confirmed plastic-induced gannet death, and it was a biscuit wrapping that was sort of foil silver plated. So you can imagine when this was moving in the sea and the gannet died, it assumed it was fish. We've now taken it very seriously, and we have a policy where any dead bird, terrestrial or marine, that is recovered, either by Keith's team or as a department, we take it to the vets, and we are performing necropsies and stomach content. So no doubt we will get a lot more, but I think it's an area which the more islands that actively look at deaths and plastic induced, it's I think going to come up with very shocking results.
Well, and sometimes it's also, one of the things I think is sometimes just one or two polluters. In the case of the monofilament issue with the frigate birds, and I met 65 dead birds, and then we did these surveys with the fishermen, and actually what I found out from several fishermen is it was actually recreational fishers. Fishermen are used to handling wildlife.
Yeah.
People who are new to it are not. And there was actually a boat with tourists that was going out, and apparently the tourists would get very upset when the bird was hooked. So instead of just reeling it in, they would cut the line, and they were cutting sometimes on one trip 10, 15 birds. So that individual actually left the U.S. Virgin Islands, and since he's departed, the mortality problem in seabird quality is gone. So it could have been one person. It's really scary to think that somebody made an impact like that.
Can I just come back as well from our perspective? And we're starting to, in Alderney, we're starting to look at plastic ingestion hopefully this year. One of our big things that we're beginning to really consider is the scale of time. We all know that plastics are established that plastics don't degrade rapidly. But looking at the gannet nests within the centre of the colonies, you've got the potential for those plastics to be in there 60 plus, 50, 60 years. And those nests might be 2 or 3 feet deep in that established plastic. So it's one of the things, it's not only the established floating materials, but the unestablished floating materials that are accruing them within the nesting sites, and how to then tackle that. We started looking at last year. And obviously, there's a lot of negatives with going within a colony where that nesting material also has this potential knock-on benefits to nesting. And actually, a number of the brief attempts that have been done with gannet colonies in Europe suggest that there's a potential negative impact to cleaning nests because the established lockdown plastics are well bound together. are much less likely to potentially, less likely to potentially cause entanglement. So by cleaning sites we may find, or but actually the fresh sites that are naturally washed, maybe those sites with a high mortality. They'll be very hard to establish, given those are also the sites with naturally very high mortality.
Oh, that rather. Can I just ask you to join your hands to thank our speakers today?